things we cover is computers and society. We've covered that a little bit. This is where it all starts to come home. I have a friend who's, some of you have heard this story before. I have a friend who is a Marine, who, you know, they talk about the Marines as the tip of the spear. He was the point of the tip of the spear. He was one of the guys who went into Baghdad first. He was in Fallujah, and they cleaned that thing out. He got a Bronze Star. He's quite a guy. But the thing I think is coolest about him, because I'm a nerd, is after he did his 2 tours of duty, he came home and he got a degree in political science and philosophy. And he and I used to have these really cool conversations about whether war was inevitable. He maintains that it is. We had a lot of great conversations around whether war was necessary. You know that saying that war is politics by some other means? He maintains that it is. I'm not so sure. And then we talked about how if war was inevitable and necessary, could it be done with honor? Could you be a warrior and be an honorable man? This is a big deal. This is a very big deal. And I'm very proud of this man, and I think he is very honorable. But one of the things that used to trouble him was this thing called collateral damage. Can anyone define collateral damage for me? What's collateral damage?
Basically when civilians get killed.
Yeah.
Non-combatants.
It's a problem. Now, again, the question is it inevitable? You know, one of the things that we've discovered is that if you're going to have a modern army, you have to have modern technology. And most weapons are built in factories. And most factories not only build weapons, they build other stuff, like household appliances. Back in World War II, we figured out that Germany really needed ball bearings. If they were going to make tanks and planes and bombs and stuff, we had to stop them, obviously. One of the ways we stopped them was by removing their ability to make ball bearings. As a result, we leveled entire cities. We just removed Dresden.
Firebomb Dresden.
Yeah. We had to take out what's called the means of production. This is not a new thing. I mean, people salted Carthage. They just wiped that city off the face of the earth. Sherman marched to the sea in the Civil War. Just took out a big swath of the South. It's an aspect of war that we've always had. And it's troublesome. I don't know any honorable member of the armed forces that wants that to happen. They love taking out bad guys. And as my friend said, he considers himself a target. His job is just to take out the other guy before he gets attacked. So this whole idea of collateral damage is a problem. Keep that in mind. That's one of your questions for the Stuxnet assignments, collateral damage. These days, collateral damage is a whole different thing than it was before. Okay, so let's go back to World War II. One of the big things we did in World War II, the United States did in World War II, is we developed the atomic bomb. But developing the bomb was only half of the coolness of that whole thing. We also developed the ability to make an atomic bomb. We developed the factories and the mechanical processes for refining plutonium. And it's not easy. It was actually done in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and up here at Hanford. We were the only people on the planet that could refine plutonium. And one of the reasons why it's real difficult is plutonium is a real heavy metal, right? Real heavy. And if you want to refine it, if you want to get a really good bomb, you have to get the heavy form of plutonium, even heavier than normal plutonium. So what you do is you take this metal and you vaporize it. You run it up to a couple thousand degrees, and then you put it in a centrifuge, which is this tall thing made out of tubes, and you spin it really fast. You spin it so fast that it's going at the speed of sound. This centrifuge is spinning faster than the speed of sound. And you spin it so fast that all the heavy stuff goes to the outside, and then you collect that up, and that gives you weapons-grade plutonium. We were the only people on the planet that could do it for many years. Eventually it got stolen, the secret got stolen, or it got leaked, one of the two. And then the Russians could do it, and then the Chinese could do it, and then pretty soon the Pakistanis could do it, and then the Indians could do it. Now, apparently, the Iranians can do it. It doesn't take a lot, you just need a couple of smart people, and then you need the right equipment. These days, if you want to manage one of these centrifuges, running at these incredible temperatures and running at these incredible speeds, you use what's called a programmable logic controller. So you've got this centrifuge, it's this really tall thing, and on top is this PLC, programmable logic controller. These are really small little stupid computers. They don't have a lot of stuff going on in them, but what they do is they control motors and servos. They listen to thermometers. Remember we talked about input, process, output, and I said some of the inputs can be sensors. These are it. They have sensors that they monitor how fast this thing is going. They have controllers for motors. So if I got a big motor up here, and there's a gigantic motor, then this little PLC does this real simple job of reading the temperature, making that thing spin faster than a whirling dervish. These PLCs are usually controlled, and there are hundreds of these in any particular factory. These are usually controlled by a Windows PC. Sometimes it's hard, but this guy has a bunch of these little guys in a network. Now this isn't true, this is not only true of plutonium refinement plant, but it's true of any modern factory. These PLCs, they're made by a German company called Siemens. And they are just the whole industrial world runs on PLCs.
Does it say Windows PC?
Yep.
What is that?
So it's like one of these things. It's one of these things, although it's probably a little more industrialized. But it's running Windows. Its job is to keep an eye on all those PLCs and to make sure that they're running correctly. Well, in the early 2000s, a really cool thing happened. Does anyone here remember the conflicker worm? The conflicker worm? It was a big deal. Everybody said, oh my gosh, the conflicker worm, it's everywhere, it's everywhere, it's everywhere. And we all had to clean our PCs up, and it never really did anything. Never really did anything. Didn't do any damage. No, this happened after Y2K. And then people noticed, and in fact this Symantec and this guy in Germany noticed, that there was another worm out there. Now you remember what a worm is. A worm, tell me what a worm is. Anybody? Worm. It's a piece of malware.
Self-replicating.
Self-replicating. That's all it does. Is it looks for new machines, and it copies itself over, and it does that again. It moves through the network, really doesn't do any damage. Its big problem is that it just spreads. A virus, if you remember, something that rides on somebody else. It's a piece of malware that infects a host. So they noticed that there was this thing moving through the network that had both of these things going on. Sometimes it would ride something else, sometimes it would duplicate itself. And it didn't seem to be doing anything. It didn't seem to be actually doing any damage. It wasn't creating any botnets. And they saw 2 or 3 versions of this thing. They would find it, and they would put it, they'd find the signature of it, and they'd get rid of it, and then you'd see another copy of it appear on the net, out in the web. When they caught this thing, they found some really cool things about it. Symantec, in your assignment, you'll read, if you go through this study, there's some really cool things about this particular bug, malware thing. It not only had these sophisticated ways of moving, but it had a thing called a rootkit. You want to remember what a rootkit is? You want to tell me what a rootkit is? Wow, give it a shot.
Then somebody else can control your computer.
Say it again, please.
If someone else can get
rootkit is installed, and once you've installed a rootkit, then someone basically owns your computer. It also had not one, it had three what are called zero-day exploits. Anyone ever heard of zero-day exploits? We haven't talked about them yet. Anyone know what a zero-day exploit is? A zero-day exploit is a bug, a dangerous security risk kind of bug that was unknown before the first day it appeared, before it started doing damage. Now sometimes you'll have bugs and you'll have viruses and worms and stuff, and people will know about them. Microsoft is constantly putting out security patches and saying, oh, we found another bug. Patch your systems or else you'll get hit with this thing. And the main problem you have as a sysadmin is just keeping up on the patches. Incredibly, people don't do this. You know, someone will tell you this is a security bug, and you don't upgrade your systems, and then your systems are vulnerable and you are a public nuisance. But a zero-day exploit is one where nobody knows about it before it actually comes into play and starts doing damage. This little bugger had not one of these, but three of them. So they named it this weird thing. Eventually it became known as Stuxnet. And the neat thing about it was it would go from Windows PC to Windows PC to Windows PC, and it would just keep moving. And eventually it would delete itself. It was looking for something. It was definitely looking for something. And it found it, because at one point we heard that Iran had to shut down hundreds of its plutonium refining centrifuges. They had apparently gone out of control and spun up out of control and destroyed themselves. Apparently, somehow, something had gotten into these plutonium refining factories and destroyed their centrifuges. When they looked at this, they realized it was targeting PLCs. Stuxnet targets PLCs. It's looking for a Windows PC that is connected to a PLC. These PLCs are customized for every factory. This is a great job, by the way. If you're interested in how factories work, you go in, the guy who's designing the machine, the mechanical engineer tells you this is what I've got to do, you code these things up. It's real-time coding, it's a very esoteric kind of thing. Anyway, they customize this stuff. This code on this PLC doesn't work for any other factory except the one that it's installed in. And this code, this program, was looking for this particular PLC. It was looking for this particular factory in Iran. And that's not even that wasn't even the coolest thing. That wasn't even the coolest thing. Some of the other things that this did is it performed what's called a man-in-the-middle attack, where you have a piece of code that's kind of into. Who has seen the movie Speed back in the 90s? Sandra Bullock, that delicious Keanu Reeves. Remember that little TV camera up in the bus? The thing all hinges on the fact that they replaced the TV camera with a loop. And so the bad guy doesn't get to see that they actually figured out how they're going to escape. All he sees is that they're still on the bus. Well, when Stuxnet installs itself, this thing is reporting to the people who are running the factory. When Stuxnet installs itself, when it finally finds itself on the right PC, talking to the right PLCs, it does exactly that. It feeds the humans what they want to see. And the way it does that is it watches the PLCs. Because the PLCs are constantly saying, I'm doing okay, my temperature is 4,000 degrees, I'm doing okay, my RPM is this. It samples this data, records it, and sends it out. So as far as the human knows, everything's okay. And then this thing tells these little guys, go crazy. piece of code, diabolical piece of code.
Wouldn't you need to know the PLC coding and addresses, and there's quite a bit more information there. I mean, this is very basic. I've been reading about it, but
Yeah.
it was an inside job that they were talking about. Someone had to have leaked the information
That's really a great question.
because
How did they test this thing? Because this is a custom facility. Now, who builds these guys, these centrifuges? Germany, Siemens. Who builds these things? Siemens.
yeah,
Who knows how to do this? GE. A lot of us, we know how to do this. The Israelis know how to do this. Who's got a copy of this? Well, there's two theories around this. Either they had a copy of this plant somewhere, and they tested it on a copy of the plant. Or remember I said that they saw 3 different waves of this thing go out? Maybe the first 2 were just figuring out how to make this thing break. And the first 2 were just scouts. Remember I mentioned Conflicker? That was a worm just moved through the network and it didn't seem to do anything. But it was sending data back somewhere. So it's a really good question. Custom code, unique to this particular plant. How did it even know what to do? There's even more than that. How does it get into a facility like that? A facility like that, a high security, top secret facility, it's not on the net. It's not on the net. One of the ways that you prevent viruses from coming in is you just take the facility off the net. Okay. Have you ever noticed that when you plug in a USB drive to a Windows box, it says, oh, I'm installing drivers, your thing will be ready in a minute? Next time you plug in a USB drive, watch. It's one of the helpful things about Windows is that Windows tries to be helpful. And when you plug in a new device, it's called plug and play. One of the first things Windows does is says to the device, hi, do you have any drivers? I don't know how to deal with you. Do you have any code that I can run to help me? And depending on the device, especially devices like printers, setting up printers used to be really tough. You had to go through all sorts of hassles to set up a printer. These days, you just plug the dang thing in. It says to Windows, here are my drivers. And Windows says, oh, thank you. And Windows runs that code. Windows runs the code that the printer gives it. Well, that doesn't seem very trustworthy. I mean, who the heck would run code from a stranger? I mean, your mother told you not to take candy from a stranger, and computers certainly shouldn't take code from strangers. How do we prevent this? We use something called driver signing. Driver signing. When you get a certificate, you get a piece of paper, a literal physical object from an authority that you can trust, and then you sign, you encode that certificate into your driver software. And Windows is set up so that it will only run code that has been properly signed. And driver signing is very important. How did they do this? They stole a certificate. They stole several of them. Black bag, spycraft type stuff. They either got a guy and turned him, but somewhere in Taiwan they got some certificates. Same way that James Bond gets anything. And they signed their drivers. So that all they needed to do was get some guy to walk into that factory and put a USB stick in a slot somewhere.
they were saying they're not sure if it was transmitted through cell phone or.
Yeah. So what's interesting is the material you've got here is speculation, and they're not really sure. They found printer imitations in the code. They found the means for this thing to say, hi, I'm a printer, and here's my drivers. The drivers install a rootkit. The rootkit takes over, and pretty soon the Stuxnet can do whatever it wants. All right, so let's summarize. We've got a really cool piece of code here. The largest piece of bad code, of malware, ever seen on the planet. It's the most sophisticated piece of malware ever seen on the planet. It had stuff, those 3 zero-day exploits, that some people say could only be developed if you had Windows source code. Who has Windows source code? Well, Microsoft does. It's not open source, so they don't let anyone else see it. Well, they probably had to let the government see it, the U.S. government. And I think since there's a copy of Windows called Red Windows or something like that, I think the Chinese have stolen Windows. Anyway, if it's true that you needed a copy of Windows, and people disagree with this, there's only a few places on the planet you can get it. And normal script kiddies can't get copies of the Windows source. There are other ways to come up with zero-day exploits. You can just read out a piece of code until you find its vulnerabilities. We've got one of the most cool pieces of malware on the planet. And it impossibly gets inside a top-secret facility in Iran and takes out their capability to produce nuclear weapons. So, questions for you are, first of all, I need you to tell me basically repeat what we just talked about. How did it work? How did it propagate? Where did it go? What is driver signing? What's a rootkit? That kind of thing. But then the speculation begins. Who would want to do this? Who would want to do this?
Everybody.
Next question. Remember we talked about collateral damage? On the face of it, this is a pretty cool thing. Somebody went in and they must have thought of this particular factory as a threat. Somebody went in and took out this factory, and they didn't have to carpet bomb Dresden. They didn't have to raise the South. They didn't have to salt the earth. They just took out the machines that caused the problem. But there's never, ever anything that clean. There's always unintended consequences. There's always collateral damage. The first time we did this was a year ago, and I had a fellow in the class, a student, who, as I was doing this little conversation, he's nodding his head, and he's nodding his head, he's nodding his head. And I said, so what is it? What is it? He said, man, the second wave hit us. I said, who's us? He said, I was working at a chemical plant in the United Kingdom at the time. And the thing came through, and our chemical plant just went crazy. Because our chemical plant is full of these PLCs. Now, they're not controlling centrifuges, they're controlling valves and pumps and the other stuff you find in a chemical plant. But there was a virus or something in here making these guys go crazy. And they had to take that whole plant offline. This is true in thousands of factories around the world. As this piece of malware went out into the wild, it was just propagating everywhere, trying all sorts of different stuff, shutting down factories left and right. Another thing is, once something like this is in the wild, everybody knows how to do it. Once you release a piece of software, anybody can do it. And since then, we've seen other examples based on the same code. One is called Dooku. You may have heard that. This was just recently. So now, even people who aren't as smart as the guys who wrote this, who aren't as well funded, they know how to take out a factory. So the next question for you is, okay, this was a nice little surgical strike. What are the unintended consequences? What happens next? Who else gets hurt? And the final question for you is, let's say you're the IT guy in a factory, and it's your job to keep your factory online and running. What do you do? What do you do? Like Rod said, some people think it may have come in through a cell phone. What are you going to do? Make everybody not carry cell phones anymore? Well, you might be able to get away with that in a military installation, although it's unlikely. What are you going to do? Make sure that you're going to put bubble gum in all of your USB slots. In this Foreign Policy magazine, the guy said that this means the end of virus protection as we know it. That you can't sit still and defend yourself. And this goes back to something my friend the Marine said. You know, we were talking once about how do you defend yourself in a firefight. And he said, oh, it's easy, you attack. You go after them, and you take them out. Because they can't shoot you if they're dead. So this guy in Foreign Policy is saying that the idea of a firewall is over. just sitting around waiting for someone to attack you is no longer going to be viable. And he suggests a couple of alternatives, keeping your data moving, that kind of thing. What it comes down to is this changed the whole face of our profession. If you go into IT, Stuxnet really changed the equation on a number of levels. One, there are people who say it was an act of war, that somebody attacked Iran, somebody destroyed property. Now, nobody got hurt, which was really cool, and I'm the first guy to say that was really cool. But we destroyed a lot of property, not only in Iran, but all over the world. We messed up factories, or somebody messed up factories all over the world. So it was an act of war carried out by a computer program. Second, now anybody can mess with a factory. It used to be that viruses just messed up your PC, sent spam, wiped your hard disk. Now the gloves are off and we've got people attacking factories. And we're teaching anybody, 4chan can do it, ScriptKitties can do it. What are we going to do about it? A lot of places like your local pumping station, they didn't worry about security. The place that makes Twinkies, they don't worry about security. At least they didn't used to. But now if someone can mess with your Twinkies, man, they can get you at home. And that's the third thing, is now we used to defend our borders. And we've been pretty lucky. We have these big oceans between us, and we have pretty good relations with our neighbors. It's been pretty hard to attack us the old way, with bombers. We had a big thing in the 60s about missiles. Now, we are under attack all the time. We are constantly under attack. And it looks like there are other foreign powers, foreign countries, maybe even corporations, that are constantly attacking our computer networks. And you think, well, so what? It's just computer networks. But they're going after our factories, they're going after our water supply and our food supply. So this is a whole different thing, and this has just happened in the 5 years or so since this thing came out. For the amount of time it takes to develop software, they were probably working on this thing for years before. So the question for you guys, if you want to do this assignment, is what the what? What are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about this? All right, so that's it. Let's take a 5-minute break.